Chrollo is looking for a particular nen ability that will ensure that Hisoka stays dead for real next time. So we're going to figure out what this ability is using fictional facts and logic. But firstly, the idea of this ability may be a bit of a retcon. In chapter 357, after killing Hisoka, Chrollo called Shalnok and told them the plan for the troops' next big score, which was that the Kakin Empire was essentially migrating to the Dark Continent, and logically, they'd be bringing all of their treasures and wealth with them. So in chapter 405, when Penolinov says that the quote treasure that Chrollo seeks on the ship is an ability that he'll need to kill Hisoka for good, this is a bit of a retcon because the idea of treasure did once mean the more stereotypical shiny treasure. But Penolinov also adds that that's why everyone else in the troop wants to find and kill Hisoka first, so that they can get their revenge in before Chrollo removes that chance once and for all. Actually, I feel like the term once and for all doesn't quite work here because Chrollo already tried once and failed, so it's more like twice and for all. But let's get into some nasty nen business now. The first thing we need to establish is that there are a whole series of abilities that are completely off the table in this discussion. I've seen a lot of people throwing around Saradnik's name, not necessarily knowing how to spell it, but they're throwing it. The idea being to give Chrollo parallel future to have an even more advantage in battle combat, or Hawkenberg's possession arrow to remove Hisoka's soul from his body. Both of those specific abilities have their own issues, but the most paramount of all is that Chrollo actually needs to have reasonably known about the ability before boarding the Black Whale 1, and that instantly disqualifies anything generated by a Guardian Spirit Beast, as well as any nen ability conjured after departure, which doesn't just include princes. This also covers any new power that came into existence as a result of Morena's Contagion game. I also personally believe that this is not going to be an existing ability possessed by one of the Mafia factions, not because the Phantom Troop seem to be completely unaware of the Mafia capabilities, because Penolinov made clear that Chrollo hadn't told them the details of his plan, probably so that he could get a head start on killing Hisoka, so Chrollo is clearly withholding information from them. But it's more so because Chrollo's goal is to get to tier 1, which made a lot of sense when we thought that the treasure he was seeking was actual treasure, since where they keep it. But with the retcon, what this means is that the required nen ability and thus its user are almost certainly on tier 1. And the final thing we need to consider is that this ability needs to be able to kill better than most. There's a wide range of nen abilities that have their own unique niches, like Melody's music that's lovely and appealing in its own way, but these sorts of abilities don't guarantee death any more than the way Chrollo originally killed Hisoka. What Chrollo is looking for is a 100% chance sure method of Hisoka death. So let's recap. The ability must have existed before the succession contest began. The ability is extremely likely to be on tier 1, and it has to be capable of ensuring a guaranteed death with no way out. And so that actually narrows things down quite a bit. And the first thing that came to my mind brain was definitely Cat's name, the individual ability possessed by second Prince Camilla. She's a prince, so she's on tier 1, a tick. She knew the ability before the contest began, also tick. And it's a particularly brutal and completely unambiguous exit from this world. Tick again. It's a counteractive nen ability that activates whenever somebody kills Camilla. And what it does after that is summon a big old kitty cat that crushes whoever killed Camilla and kneads that person into what I can only describe as some sort of raw or a goop, with this goop then being fed to Camilla and bringing her back to life using the life force of said goop. And there is no way that Hisoka would be coming back from that. During Heaven's Arena, he programmed Bungee Gum to restart his heart and lungs. That's how he revived. But if Hisoka had no heart and lungs, in fact, if he had no body in general to revive, then there's nothing that he can do. I personally find this possibility really interesting because Hisoka would be killing himself, and it makes me want to see what he would do to an opponent who he knows has this ability, and if that opponent were his one and only true love Chrollo, then I could see Hisoka almost romantically deciding to activate it and leaving this world through a beautiful double death. Because maybe he pulls some sort of dick move to ensure that Chrollo also actually dies in the process. At the moment, the best counter argument I've seen to Cat's name is that it requires Zetsu to activate, and that's a problem for Chrollo because in nen theory, you cannot use Zetsu and Skill Hunter at the same time. If Chrollo enters a state of Zetsu, then theoretically Skill Hunter vanishes, as does whatever ability it was tapping. But to this, I have two counter arguments. The first is that we don't know for a fact that this ability requires Zetsu to function. It's an assumption that it does because Camilla was was using Zetsu at the time. However, I think it's also quite likely that she was doing so in order to make herself purposely defenseless, so that she could actually be killed by something as simple as a bullet to the head. So that might not be a requirement, however, let's say it is. And even in that case, I don't see how it would be too terribly different for Crawler, because if Kat's name is marked in the book, then its conditions should theoretically carry over even if the book itself has vanished. And I'm thinking that this may be the case because Kat's name is a purposeful use of post-mortem Nen. In fact, Camilla even directly mentions it, and there is a precedent for how post-mortem Nen functions within Skill Hunter, which we saw with the Sun and Moon ability. This was post-mortem Nen invoked by the Meteor City Elder, and because it was post-mortem Nen, the ability itself and its effects did not disappear even when Skill Hunter was closed and vanished. So I could see Kat's name functioning in very much the same way. The trickier thing for me is that in order to steal it, Crawler would need to see Kat's name in action, meaning that he may need to sacrifice someone to it, because it's very difficult to make someone kill Camilla of their own accord. Although come to think of it, that may be why he allowed Illumi Zoldyck to join the Phantom Troop, because after Shalnok's death, the troop lost their manipulator. So what I'm seeing is a situation where Illumi controls a needle person and gets them to murder Camilla, at which point we see the ability. And from there, Illumi could even manipulate Camilla herself to fulfill the rest of Crawler's conditions, to answer a question about Nen and to touch the book, all of which needs to be done in 1 hour. And as a side note, it would be nice to see Camilla without this ability. She's almost completely reliant on it at the moment and ignoring her guardian spirit beast. Part of that is arrogance, but part of that is also that if the Zetsu thing is correct, then her natural ability and the guardian spirit beast may be incompatible, because Zetsu cuts off the aura required to feed the guardian spirit beast. But it's not as if Camilla would be out of the contest if she lost this ability. Crawler would probably need to keep her alive to guarantee that the ability stays within Skill Hunter, so we just get to see a different side of her. Meanwhile, the only other prince who was a confirmed Nen user before the contest began is Benjamin, and his ability is Benjamin Baton. Originally, I didn't see this as a great option because it only ticks 2 out of 3 boxes, but then I had a bit of a rethink. Benjamin Baton is extremely powerful because it allows Benjamin to use as many inherited abilities as he has access to without any of the annoying conditions that Crawler has to manage for his suite of Hatsu. The caveat is that he can only use these abilities when those loyal to him are killed, after which point Benjamin inherits them, quite powerful, but also quite potentially applicable to the Phantom Troop, because the troop members have every bit as much, if not more, loyalty to Crawler. And what I'm thinking is that this ability may also work retroactively. If Crawler were able to steal Benjamin Baton, then he may automatically receive the Nen abilities of his fallen comrades. So Shalnok's Black Voice, Kotobi's Gallery Fake, also Pakunoda's powers, and maybe even Uvagine's. And the reason why that is so important is because Black Voice and Gallery Fake were integral to defeating Hisoka the first time. And part of our problem is now that Crawler can no longer use those abilities because Hisoka, the dastardly villain, went and killed Shalnok and Kotobi to make sure that that scenario can never happen again. And this could also open up quite a morbid path if, say, the Phantom Troop die one by one and Crawler keeps inheriting their abilities. And during the endgame of this arc, he might have a full 2 hands of abilities, 1 finger for each spider or something along those lines. But another reason why this ability is useful is because to kill Hisoka the first time, Crawler of course had to mix and match like 6 other Nen abilities, which was an absolute pain for him to keep up with. But if he had completely unfiltered access to a range of abilities, then that would turn him into the powerhouse of Hisoka's dreams. But without knowing which abilities Crawler would use and combine to kill Hisoka, I don't think it's a very strong contender, but something that is maybe probably worth a mention is Silent Majority, an ability that kills so quickly and seemingly has no counter other than to kill the user in a handful of seconds before you die. And you've got 11 seconds to be precise, assuming all 4 of the snakes do their snake thing. So it would leave Hisoka with exactly 11 seconds to figure a way out of this, and the number 11 is very interesting. Silent Majority is actually inspired by a 1-volume manga named They Were 11, which was about identifying an imposter within a group of 11 people. And this was genuinely the OG Among Us because we had 10 space cadets sent to space for their final test. But when they get there, oh my god, there's 11 people and nobody can remember how this happened or who it is. Which is very much what Hisoka was doing during York New City. There were 11 numbered Phantom Troop members and he was the imposter among them. I think that idea might be coincidental though, because it also works how it's currently being used in the context of Kurapika's Nen classes. analysis, but it's definitely not to be ignored because it does kind of work. Although as horrifying as the ability is, I don't know if it fulfills that third criteria of a solid guaranteed death. To most human beings, yeah, it would, but this is Hisoka we're talking about, and look, I don't know what he would do after having all of the blood drained from his body, but my problem is that there is still a body, and so silent majority doesn't feel as locked in as some other options would be. Which brings us to our next possibility, Mr. Kurapika. Kurapika and his chain abilities are the most reasonable candidates for criteria number the first, being that Chrollo needs to have known about them before the succession contest began, and Chrollo, he definitely knows about these abilities because they've been used on him. And a lot of people are mentioning Chain Jail. I don't know why. Hisoka's not a member of the Phantom Troop. I don't think it'd work. And I think what we'd be looking at here is actually Judgment Chain. This is where Kurapika wraps a chain around a target's heart and states a command which, if violated, will trigger the stake of retribution to pierce the target's heart and kill them instantly. The idea being that you could set Hisoka a no-nen rule, you can enforce Zetsu on him and even cut off any use of post-mortem nen, or you could even set a no post-mortem nen rule right from the outset to begin with, just to make sure that any death that does happen from here on out is indeed final. Now, the main counter-argument against acquiring Judgment Chain is that, and this is a bit vague, but Kurapika can only use it when his eyes are scarlet, which he quite literally stated in chapter 108. However, he then goes on to clarify that he becomes a specialist when his eyes are scarlet, and that's what enabled him to conjure the Judgment Chain. So it may not necessarily be the eyes themselves that are the condition. When writing the nen ability, Kurapika may not necessarily have said, I can only do this when my eyes are red. It may be something more like, I can only use this ability when I'm a specialist. And that would be very handy because Chrollo is a natural specialist. With Kurapika, being an Emperor Time may not be the literal condition to use Judgment Chain. It's more that Emperor Time is what amps up the rest of his nen stats that allows the conjuration of an item as powerful as Judgment Chain. But if Chrollo naturally possesses those stats, then he could take it and make use of it. And he has experienced it firsthand, although he'd need to see Judgment Chain performed again for this to work. Because the conditions for Skill Hunter, as stated before, demand that you carry them all out within the space of 1 hour. So simply having seen it isn't going to be of much benefit except to know that it exists and it's an option. And Chrollo may very well know that Kurapika is on board because Kurapika is of course a Zodiac now. It's very public information. And while we're here, we should consider the possibility that the target is another Zodiac. While they are all trying to find the nasty traitor within them, the Zodiacs decided to share their nen abilities with one another. So they all know what they're capable of, but we don't. And the more people who know a thing, the higher the chance that the thing will be leaked. Especially if there's a traitor. And that traitor does something traitorous, like leak this information to someone like Chrollo. And when you think about it, this was a potentially horrible decision, because there was a guaranteed traitor working with Pariston and or beyond, and the Zodiacs have now basically given that traitor a list of their detailed abilities, and so Beyond's faction can now prepare counters for each and every one of them. In terms of the abilities we do know, I don't think that any of them fulfill the Chrollo criteria. Nizaistomp's Cross Game, Size 3 Monkeys, Gel, Snake Hand, Cluck, Bird Manipulation. None of the abilities we really know fit, but there are so many unknown Zodiacs with unknown abilities that maybe it's one of them. But of course, this is Hunter x Hunter, and as a result, the most likely answer is that this ability is going to belong to some dude that we've never met with some sort of specialty that combines with Chrollo's existing stolen powers. But you let me know in the comments what you think the coveted ability is.